Lesson 16, new work. Use the pictorial system to solve these problems. Pictorial just means picture. So what they want you to do is go back to representing the problems like this. So all we're going to do is draw the little chocolate chip looking X values and the white chocolate chip looking representations for the stars, or for the opposite of X, and then we just put a box around the numbers. So that's pretty easy. So this would just be 2 triangles plus a white triangle, one that isn't filled in, plus a 5 block is equal to 2 X's, which are the filled in triangles or chocolate chips or whatever you want to call them. So remember, in algebra, whatever we do on one side we can do on the other, and when we are using pawns and we set it up this way, I can see that I can pull this pawn down and this pawn down, and I can pull this pawn down and this pawn down, and then I would be left with no blue pawns or no X's on either side. But I still have a star and a 5 block right here, and that has to equal nothing. Well, in math, nothing is 0. So actually I have something plus 5 has to equal 0. And you'll remember that we know that opposites combine to make 0. So if this is a positive 5, then this one has to be a negative 5. So star, or the opposite of X, is negative 5, and X is 5. So putting these back into our original equation, we get 2 times 5, which would be 10, plus a negative 5, plus 5 is equal to 2 times 5, which is 10. So I can see here that I have a plus 5, and I have a minus 5, and I have a plus 5. Those two cancel out. They're a 0 pair. And here I have 10 equals 10, or 10 plus 0 equals 10. Now remember, I can only cancel those out if they're on the same side of the equal sign. I can't bring this white pawn over with this blue pawn and say they're a 0 pair. The 0 pairs have to be on the same side of the equal sign. The other way I could have solved this using 0 pairs is I could have looked at this differently. There's always more than one way to solve a math problem. I could have looked at this differently and said, here is a blue pawn, here is a blue pawn, here's a white pawn, here's a block, and here are 2 blue pawns. I could have made a 0 pair right here, and that would have taken those 2 totally out of the picture. And then I could have taken down this pawn right here and gotten rid of that, and taken down one on the other side and gotten rid of that. And then I would only be left with a 5 block and a pawn. And that would mean that my X was 5, and my opposite of X is the opposite of 5, which is negative 5. So my check is 10 equals 10. Either of those ways would work. All right, next one. Pictorial system again. So now you know what we're doing. We're just drawing And here's an x value, so that's going to be filled in, and I have a 2 block, and that's equal to 2 blue pawns and a 10 block. And instead of putting a 10 block here, because I have a 2 over here, I'm going to make this 2 blocks that equal or sum to 10. So 2 plus 8 is 10, and that way I have a 2 block on each side. So let's go ahead and find our 0 pairs again. Here's a 0 pair, so I can cross that out, and again they're on the same side of the equal sign. And now I have 2 blocks on each side, so I can pull those both down and get rid of those. So now I'm left with 2 white pawns on one side, and I have 2 blue pawns and an 8 over here. Well, it would be nice if I could just have pawns on one side and numbers on the other. That means that I would want to not have those blue pawns there. And one of the ways we have learned to help us get rid of these is either to pull them down, which I can't do because I don't have 2 blue ones over here, but I can add a 0 pair so that to the opposite side, so that I can pull these down. So if I pull this one down and this one down, that means I need to have 2 blue ones over here to pull down. And that means I have to make a 0 pair. So here is going to be my white, and I'm going to put my blue one underneath it. Here's one of my 0 pairs that I'm adding. And here is my white, and here is another blue pawn. So now I have 2 blue pawns on the left, and so I can pull these down, which means they go away, and I can pull these 2 down, which means they're going to go away. That one's going to go away, and that one's going to go away. So now I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4 white pawns. This was a 0 pair, it doesn't matter, is equal to those I pulled down, 8. So I just have to ask myself, 4 times what number gives me 8? Well, I know that 4 times 2 gives me 8. So I'm going to come over here and write positive 2 for my white pawn, or my star. Just go ahead and draw a white pawn above all of those. These are my blue pawns. Not much of an artist. So if this is equal to 2, this has to equal the opposite of 2, which is negative 2. Some kids always want to assume that the x value is always going to be positive and the y value is always going to, or the star value is always going to be negative, like we had up here. But they just need to be the opposites. So they have the exact same digit, but one of them is going to have a negative in front of it. If you wanted to write a positive in on the other one, that's fine. That just kind of emphasizes that they are opposites. So now I have to do my check. So that means I go back to my original problem. Remember, there's some things that I pulled down and crossed out, but what I want to do is look at my original problem as it was written, and if I have 3 stars, that means I have 3 times positive 2, which is going to give me 6. And then I'm going to add a negative 2, and then I'm going to add a positive 2. Well, look, I have a 0 pair right here. A negative 2 and a positive 2, that is 0. So actually all I'm left with on this side is 6. If I did my problem correctly, I should have a total value of 6 on this side. So my x values are negative 2 if I have two groups of -2, I have -4, and then plus a 10. Now, if I'm not totally sure what that is, or I've forgotten the algorithm of how to do this, one thing I encourage kids to do is to draw something out. And so I'm going to use, I'm going to do it up here. I'm going to use 4 circles. And inside those 4 circles, I'm going to put minus signs. So this represents my -4. And then my other circles are going to have positive signs in them, and I'm going to draw 10 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But I'm going to put pluses in those. That's actually all this side is saying. I've got 10 positives and I've got 4 negatives. What do I have left? Well, here I can see I have a 0 pair. A positive and a negative together make 0. If I give you $10 and then I take that $10 back, you've got 0. So these are all zeros. And I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I know that this quantity right here is 6 as well. So this side I had 6, and this side I have 6. So my check is 6 equals 6. Okay, number 3. Number 3, I'm going to erase some of what I did for my check so I can draw my pictures. This is a blue pond, and it says I have to take away 2 white ponds. Well, I don't have any white ponds here. So my strategy, if you remember, is to add 0 pairs. So I'm going to add a pair, that means 2, and one has to be blue and one has to be white. So there's 1 white pawn I can take away, and then I'm going to add another blue pawn and another white pawn. There's another white pawn I can take away. Now, when I take something away, it never comes back. So this is totally gone, this is totally gone. So now I'm left with 3 blue pawns, and I have an 8 block right there. And that's equal to 2 white pawns and 3 blue pawns. Now again, these are all on the same side of the equal sign. So as long as they're on the same side, I can pair them up. So I'm going to draw these right above here, because then I can show here is a 0 pair and here is a 0 pair. So what I'm left with is 1 pawn. 1 regular pawn here. So this one, again, there's more than one way to solve a problem. It's always nice if I can get number blocks on one side and pawns on the other. And you can see in this particular problem, I have only pawns on this side. I don't have any number blocks, but I have both on this side. So probably what I want to do is I probably want to pull down all 3 of these blue pawns. That's one way to do this problem. So I would pull that one down, pull that one down, and pull that one down, and that would leave me only with my 8, which is what I want. I just want my numbers over here. But if I pull down 3 on this side, I have to pull down 3 on this side. And so far I've only got 1 right there. So I'm going to have to add more 0 pairs. So here's a 0 pair, and here's a 0 pair. Well, now I have 2 more blue pawns to pull down. Just like I pulled down these 3, now I have 3 I can pull down. So right now, those are down below, and all I'm left with is 2 white pawns. And 2 white pawns on one side are equal to 8. So I know my doubles for 8. 8 plus 8 is 4. Or excuse me, 4 plus 4 is 8. So I know that my white pawns are going to have a value of 4. If they have a value of 4, this has to be the same digit but the opposite. It's going to be negative. So now let's go back and let's see if we can figure out our check with these values. So over here I have a negative 4. That's my x value. And it says I'm going to take away 2 positive 4s. Well, plus 4 and plus 4 is 8. So I'm going to take away 8. Then I'm going to add 8. Well, I see right now that I've got a minus 8 and a plus 8. Right there, that tells me I have a 0 pair. So I'm actually just left with a negative 4 right here. Let's see if I get negative 4 on the other side when I check. My stars are 4. So if I have 2 groups of 4, I have 8. 2 times 4 is 8. And then I'm going to add 3 groups of negative 4. Well, 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. So now I have, this is gone, I have a positive 8 and I have a negative 12. 8 plus negative 12 is negative 4. This simplifies to negative 4. And if I drew out circles, 12 circles with negatives in them, and then 8 circles with positives in them, when I paired them up, I would be left with 4 circles with negatives in them. So my check is negative 4 is equal to negative 4. I have a total value of negative 4 on each side. Last one. This one uses the distributive property. In other words, I have a quantity that is inside of the parentheses, and this 2 is telling me I have to double everything inside the parentheses. It's not a number block when it's right up against the parentheses. So I'm going to double these values. So this actually is going to be 2 stars plus 2 times 3. And this is what I generally have my students do, is draw those arrows. 2 times the star is 2 stars. 2 times the 3 is 6, plus 5 x's is equal to x plus 20. Now, because they gave me a 6 block over here, this is a number block, I'm going to change this 20 into a 6 plus something. 6 plus what gives me 20? I'm going to change it into 6 plus 14. Now I know you don't have a 14 block, but you could make a 10 and a 4. But that way I've got 6's that I can pull down on both sides. But I'm supposed to use the picture method, so I'm going to put 2 white pawns right here, and I'm going to put 5 blue ones. Now I don't have very much room here, so I'm going to put 2 blue ones right here, and then I'm going to put 3 blue ones over here, because addition is commutative. When I'm adding, I can actually put these in any order. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I still have my 5 blue pawns. So I'm going to replace this with a blue pawn. And now I can see that I have a 6 on each side. So I'm going to pull those down so they go away. So now I'm left with a blue pawn plus 14. And over on this side I have, let's see, I have blue pawns and white pawns. First I'm going to pull down this pawn and this pawn so they go away. And then I'm left with this blue pawn, these 2 white pawns, and these 3 blue pawns. Well, I can find 0 pairs over here. So I'm going to loop around and catch that one. And so these are a 0 pair, and these are a 0 pair. So what I'm left with is this one right here and this one right here, and they have to equal, when I add those 2 together, they have to equal 14. So I've only got 2 of them, so I asked myself, what plus what equals 14? And it has to be the same number because they're the same size and they're the same shape. So this would be 7 and this would be 7. So over here I'm going to say this is 7, this is -7. Now let's go ahead and see if that works out. If I have -7 for my star, and I put -7 back inside of my parentheses, I'm going to erase some of my drawing right here so I have some room. -7 plus 3. Remember, when you have parentheses, if you have all the values, right here we didn't have the values, so we had to use the distributive property and draw it out down here. But now I think I know what this value is, and it's -7. -7 plus 3 is going to give me a -4. I'm going to come down here and write that. -4. Well, I still have to multiply that by 2. 2 times -4, that's going to give me -8. You sure don't give us much room to write this. So this whole quantity right here is -8. Now this says multiply 5 times whatever x is. Well, 5 times 7 is going to give me 35. So I'm going to have 35 right here, and I have -8 down here. So -8 plus 35 is going to give me 27. So on this whole side of the equal sign, I have a value of 27. Well, when I look on this side, I have x is equal to a 7, and 7 plus 20 is 27. That side was certainly easier to figure out than the first side. So my check for this one is 27 equals 27. Drawing these out in picture form is a good skill to have. The only thing I would say is this probably should have been done on a blank sheet of paper.